Hey everyone, welcome to HR Tech Talks. I'm so glad to have you here today with us. It's going to be a great conversation. As always, if you're chiming in, you're listening in, you're connecting, please take a minute, pop your name in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from, where you're listening in from, because it's always fun for me to see and for our guests to find out where you're hanging out. And so we always have guests from not just across the U.S. but across the world, and that's always exciting for me to see as well. In the conversation today, we're going to talk about something that actually we just finished some new research on. In this research, we're asking about reskilling and learning. We didn't just actually survey employers, we also surveyed learners, so your employees. We asked them what they were thinking, what they're feeling about the types of skill development opportunities they had. And one of the things we found in the study, we asked the learning professionals, the HR leaders, and we asked them about the gaps they saw in their learning technology last year. And 8 out of 10 companies, 80% said we had some sort of gap. We were not able to overcome the things that were right there in front of us and the challenges that hit us. We could not overcome them with the tools that we had. And so today's conversation, I'm excited to talk to Allie Knapp from Wisetail, because we're going to talk about some of the things that their company does around learner engagement, getting your people in the mix, not just telling them what to do, but allowing them to have some sort of input and some control over their learning journeys. I think that's a really powerful tool, and it gets them excited about what's next. And again, we'll talk about all those kind of things and some of the use cases, right? Can we use that in onboarding? How do we build social kind of communities in the company when we are all virtual and remote in some cases still? Or if you're not virtual and remote, you still need a chance to build that connection for those people, because it's a critical part of engaging them. So I'll stop talking. I'm going to bring Allie on. So excited to have her here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Ben.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so excited to hear from you and to learn from you. I told you I'll be taking notes myself, because I'm excited to learn from you and from what you and the team are doing. Before we get into some of the fun stuff around learning and the trends and what's happening and how you're serving customers, will you take just a minute or two and tell us more about who you are and who the company is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Allie Knapp. I'm the president of Wisetail, and Wisetail is a learning and communication platform that really drives companies to turn their groups into communities. And so we do that through a full digital platform. And you'll notice in the digital platform that we have, there's a lot of engagement that happens between our learners to really drive and build more of that community. And so that's what we're looking to do. And our platform serves employee bases. It also serves companies to train their customers, as well as maybe their partners, or kind of sales enablement training. So the platform's very flexible and allows companies to really build communities in all different areas and aspects. And so that's a little bit about the technology that we have. I am based out of Bozeman, Montana, and kind of personally enjoy a lot of outdoor activities and things that I can do close to Montana when I'm not running Wisetail. So.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to have you here as part of this. And one of the things I actually want to talk about, you touched on it just now, the companies and communities piece. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm kind of curious if you could, what does that mean to you, right? For a company to not just be a company, but to be an actual community. Talk about that in a learning context, because I think that's one of the things that we skip over when we think about learning in most companies. It's like, okay, I've got this piece of content, or I've got to develop this curriculum or whatever else. And that has nothing to do with the community at all. So will you talk about that for a minute, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So where we're coming from with that turning companies into communities is the importance of really engaging your learners and allowing them to see and interact with one another in order to build a community around learning. And you can look at learning and communication in a way that informs them about your company and all of the aspects of your company. But when you're putting them into a system together and allowing learners to interact with one another, that's going to promote them to be, more of that company advocate and more, maybe culturally tied to that company, which means they're going to be a stronger advocate for you and your brand, and really be able to deliver on that brand promise that you have as a company. Because really what you're doing is creating a person that's super engaged with the work that they're doing, engaged in their learning that they're doing within the company, and And so they're really becoming more part of a community, and that strength of community, I think, is what continues to bring people back to learn more, to be more active and kind of more driven in where it is that they're going, as well as where is the company going.
Wonderful. One of the things that you were saying, that one of the things that popped in my head was, I've always heard, and I've seen this when I've run HR teams in the past, high performers want to associate with other high performers, right? They want to spend time around people who are performing at or higher than the level they're at, because that's going to drive them to be better. And so giving them a chance to see other people and to see what other people are learning and to understand, hey, look, I really respect Allie. She's doing a great job over there. She's killing it. Oh, wait, she's taking this class. Maybe I ought to do that too. Right? I want to be on her level. I want to perform, or I'm always chasing, right? But I want to be better than I am today. And I feel like that's a key part of that. That's why I wanted to really dig into the communities piece of it, because again, usually we think content, and there's nothing wrong with content. There's nothing wrong with like the courses and all the other fun stuff we have to think about. There's nothing wrong with getting up and teaching a live class, even today, right? Social distancing, you can figure it out. But what we saw in our research was those companies that said we had a gap, we had some issue. The number one thing they said that was an issue coming out of that was actually engaging people in some sort of virtual setting, making them feel like they're connected, making them feel like they have some say-so in the content. And I think those are some of the kinds of things that you tap into there when you give people not just visibility into what other learners are doing, but also you probably talk more about that experience. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. Talk about the experience. If I'm a learner, I come in and I get a chance to the world's my oyster. I get to dive into whatever kind of content I want to. Tell me about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it's really important as a company to drive those experiences and have them be some of that formal training content that is maybe more of the top-down content pushed from a company, right? But I think we've seen really strong engagement when there's content and pieces that are, community driven. So it means other learners are actually contributing into the system and sharing relevant content, maybe even articles, links, videos, things that really they've seen and that has helped them progress. I mean, that's not going to be your full company, right? It's going to be, like you said, it's going to be that top end, that maybe the top end of that bell curve, right, of learners. But if that section is really driving more of those learning experiences, that's going to pull other learners into that as well. And so if you can see and have visibility around what some of those top learners are consuming, what they're doing in the system, even some of the comments and things like that they're putting into the content and rating content, I think that drives the entire community to be more active and more engaged around their overall learning experience. We have this neat section in the platform where you can go in and share and actually add comments, but then other learners can come in and comment on those as well and maybe add to that learning experience. And we've had companies that actually will take that content and weave it into formal training. So you may go through a little bit, maybe go through a formal SCORM packet, but then you'll get to see how other learners that are actually a part of your company have also, contributed to that learner experience, and it resonates a little bit more with that end user.
That is tremendous. One of the things that I kind of clued you in on before we started recording today in our prep, I was telling you that one of the things that I saw in the research I wanted to ask you about, because again, you're exposed to a lot of companies, a lot of different learning kind of philosophies and approaches in the market. And one of the things that I saw that was intriguing was we asked about which method, right, learner-driven, voluntary sort of content consumption, or company-mandated, compliant, not just compliance, but company-mandated stuff. We tell you to do it. And what we found was when someone is taking that stuff that they choose to, they feel like it's more connected to their own performance and to their own engagement. But when we say, no, which one leads to better company performance? It's the stuff that we tell them to do, right? We make them do that. We require it for all of our learners because we feel like that connects in with the company piece. And I don't want to, burst anyone's bubble, but I feel like those are two different things. They don't have to be two separate pieces. It's like a false dichotomy, right? It doesn't have to be just one or just the other. And I'd love to hear from you. Do you feel like this more learner-driven piece, we've already talked about the engagement, right? We've already talked about the individual performance. Do you feel like that can also lead to the company performance piece too?
Oh, absolutely. I think your people strategy in general really does drive that business performance, and it's something that you have to look at. We'll revisit often, right? I think we all took 2020 and realized that we didn't know a lot of, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? And so there were a lot of shifts and changes that we saw in 2020, but kind of talking about more of those formal training pieces that are maybe a little bit more top down from company versus some of the learner engagement pieces that are either contributed through the team or are maybe not specific to your role or your company, and they're more of those growth driven pieces, let's say like using LinkedIn Learning or other disparate systems to drive that. And so when we talk about kind of separating those two pieces, I really see it has to be a combination of both. And I think that a lot of times those learner-driven experiences are ones that pull learners into a platform or a system. And so those are a draw. That's something that you maybe want to do, but you don't have to do. So you're in the system, you're a little bit more engaged in those learnings. You take time to set aside 10 or 15 minutes to do those because it's something that you want to do to grow yourself as a person, as a learner. And when you're in that system, you maybe also check and do some of your more top-down driven training, right? And so if you have those both in combination, it's going to drive the overall performance of the company in a stronger way because you have people that are a little bit more engaged in the company and the culture and as a part of that, and it's not driven by kind of one single learning, but instead a combination of both. And I'll give a couple examples. I mean, we have clients that I think do a really good job of pulling their learners into the system through communication aspects, but through other, learning pieces as well. One of our restaurant clients based out of Texas, Torchy's Tacos, they actually have a book club that they put through their system and encourage their employees to be a part of this book club, while also the same system that has more of their formal training, that, HR training and some of the specific, your food handlers, all of those certified trainings are in the same system where they're also building that community, building culture by trying to pull them in to different learning experiences. And I think, again, if you can create more of that pull as opposed to that just top down, you have to do this training by X date, you're going to have a much more engaged learner community, and they're going to be engaged in your brand, which is going to allow them to drive and really deliver on your brand promise, right? And that in the end is going to push your company forward.
I had forgotten about this, but as you were talking about some of the mandatory trainings, things like that, I had forgotten about this. But years ago, we had a compliance training, and it was, hey, schedule your time, come see it. Everybody's got to see it. And we finished the time slots that had been allotted, like 20% of the people had actually showed up. And so we still had a big chunk of people, and they said, we'll just send it out in a PowerPoint and everybody do it. But they're missing that other part, right? That community piece that you were talking about a minute ago. And so we actually instead kind of adapted and said, okay, we want everybody to submit your most crazy out of this world kind of story you've seen around compliance. And everybody's got to tell us something that you've seen, right? It could be a time someone went above and beyond, like they're trying to do the right thing. Someone did something wrong, whatever else, right? Don't call anybody out, but just play a part in this. And we ended up with about 15 different stories that we could use, not just to send the content back out to everybody, but to say, here are some real life examples. Here are some things. Which one of these is, the craziest one? Which one of these have you actually seen yourself? And let people kind of vote. And this is years ago, right? Before we had the tools like this we could have used, it would have made it so much easier. But the whole goal was, let's take something that's very passive, that's very static, and let's try to make it living, breathing, active, engaging for people. So we're all going to take some compliance training on an ethics, and we're all excited about it. Not really. No one ever said that, I don't think. But at the end of it, people were talking about it months later. Like, hey, you remember that ethics training? Like that example that somebody gave was so funny. Or I actually remembered this thing because that stuck out to me, right? We know that humor and things make people remember. And so it was just one of those fun things that we happened on entirely by accident. I just didn't want to do another, I'll just email the PDF out and let everyone, do read receipts saying that I watched this, because that doesn't excite anybody, and it didn't excite me either.
Right. It's really like, I think a lot of what you're talking about is pulling that storytelling aspect into it as well, right? Like it's more about the real experiences that you've gone through, and then how you can take the training that you went through, or more of that formal content you just went through, and apply that to your own, your own learning, and take what other people have learned and use that as well. And then I think the challenge that we all have is, okay, and how can you do that in a digital space? Because now, a lot of companies have shifted, and there's more, remote work than ever. And so how can we do that and recreate some of those experiences that maybe happened in person and things like that, and do that in more of a digitally engaging environment?
One of the things that you mentioned a minute ago, you have customers you're working with that are in the restaurant space, right, in retail and things like that. And we get swayed by the whole virtual thing, but those people are still showing up at a work site, having to do this learning and things. So I'd love for you to talk about onboarding maybe as a use case for that group, because these companies are hiring tons of people, right? I drove yesterday to have lunch, and there were 12 help wanted signs that I passed on that 30-minute drive. And people are trying to get people in. There's a lot of hiring that's happening and going to happen. And so the second someone's on, the onboarding process begins. And talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind, in the context of what some of your customers are doing, or how they're approaching that. Because I feel like this is another opportunity where in the past we've leaned towards, here's your information, good luck. Right. We're missing that chance to say, hey, here's a couple points of connection. We're going to make you feel like you're part of this. Not just giving you a bunch of content, but making you feel like you're part of something bigger and something better. And we're excited to have you here. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of how I've seen some of the onboarding shifting, especially throughout 2020, and then early this year as well, is really starting the onboarding and starting that training with more of the why with the company, right? There's a lot of what I've seen being developed is a lot of the company vision, the company mission, even a lot further information on history, and kind of diving into more of that, so a little bit more about the company you're a part of, and why you should be excited to be a part of this company every day, right? And so I think that what I've seen is in onboarding training, they're really setting the tone a lot more, and that's something that's happening right there in that learner experience, and so kind of setting the beginning part with that, and then driving more into I think more of your standard trainings that you need to have in order to be an active engaged employee, but then also weaving in your position-based training, and so pieces that are really relevant to you as a learner, as an employee in that space. And then what we've seen as well in 2020 is the ability to broaden that and be trained on more than just your specific position you're coming into, but having some more open content to advance your skills, whether that's in the leadership side of things, or whether that's cross position, being able to jump into another position that's relevant to the position that you were hired for. But being able to do that in a very streamlined way, I think that a lot of the companies that in the U.S. in general, I mean, some people went through layoffs and reduction in workforce, right? And then now we're seeing that they need to get people and employees hired and back and productive really, really quickly. So how can they streamline that process a little bit more? And I think a lot of that is happening digitally. We've seen clients have a lot of success of being able to run a lot of those core topics digitally, while also doing some in person. Our system allows you to do observation checklists, which means I'm going to work through some content digitally, and then I'm going to raise my hand in the system. I raise my hand in the system and say, I'm ready to be checked on this. And then you're doing a little bit more of that peer-to-peer, that shoulder-to-shoulder learning, and you're going through a specific task or, showing how to do something. And then, your manager or the person that's viewed you doing this goes in and marks you off as you've completed that peer-to-peer training as well. And so I think that helps too with, engaging learners, right? It's like you want to be able to do some things and be able to focus and do things in a digital silo while also not forgetting that, we do, to your point, right? Help wanted signs everywhere, right? There still is very much an in-person component as well.
Yes. But I love the checklist piece of that. I'm thinking years ago, I had seen a fun case study of Domino's Pizza, and they were like, right? When one of the things that they realized was their quality of some of the pizza at that time, like just how it's put together. They said, we got an issue with this. So they put together a training that allowed people to virtually, put this together, so not wasting a bunch of materials, but virtually, how much of this do you use? Where does it go? You've got this issue. How do you respond? And same kind of thing. Like you've got to practice that, because the data show that we can talk to people a lot, but if it's just a passive activity and it's all one way, they're not going to learn nearly as much if they get a chance to respond and engage, which is a big part of what you're talking about. They get a chance to interact with others and learn alongside them, but also being able to, like you're talking about with these checklists, like I've got to do it. And the shorter we can make that distance from I'm teaching you a new skill to you get to practice that skill, the shorter we make that distance, the more likely they'll really stick and retain in their head when they're having to go out there and practice it in real life in the real world. So if we can shorten that up, and I love the example of that checklist piece, because that makes it, that doesn't just say we want you to do this just to be able to go out there and work. It's like, no, these are the most important tasks you're going to have to do in your job. And if you can't do these now, then we need to help you now while it's a safe space before we put you out there in front of a customer who's going to probably respond less kindly than I would in a training sort of context, and get you up to speed on those kind of things. That safe space, I think, also is a kind of a critical part of that.
Definitely. And I'm a huge advocate of mixed mediums as well, right? And also different media types that a learner moves through, because we all learn differently, right? For some people, the peer-to-peer and actually doing and showing that you can perform X task is, you need to do that in order for that training to really resonate. And then there's other learners that it's like you read it and you have it. You can perform it after just reading through that. There's other people that it's like they want to see a video and they want to be able to go back and replay that and see it, done over a couple of times before they want to do it in person. And so just being able to accommodate all of those different learning styles, I think is really important.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody has their own unique flavor. And again, that's one of the fun pieces of tools like what you and the team put together, because it allows someone to pursue that learning experience the way they want to. I've got to go back and watch this 3 times to make sure I'm fully confident, because I'm not going to try it in front of anybody until I am 100% sure. And others are like, yeah, give it a shot, see what happens. And if it's wrong, they'll tell me and I'll fix it, but I'll just give it a shot. And it accounts for that wide variety of approaches to performance at work and learning experiences and all those kinds of things. In the last couple of years, the conversation around like learner experience, everyone's like, oh, you've got to create a great learner experience. Like it's this one thing and it's up here on the pinnacle. And if you just figure out what that one thing is, you can solve for it. But one of the key facets of it, based on the companies I've talked to, the learners that we've researched with, there's not one thing that everyone has to do. If you just create that one experience, that it just works, because everybody is unique. Everybody has a little different approach. So I'm so glad you brought that into the conversation, because that's a piece. Again, we sometimes just assume that the peanut butter spread approach is going to work. We'll just kind of smooth that over and everyone will get the same amount and it will be good. And you're missing a chance to really show people, hey, we heard you. We know that you need this thing, and we're going to make sure and spend a little extra time on that. Or this is your preference. This is your style. Every time you put out content, you're doing this. Here's how you respond to it. So we're going to give you a little extra time to process before we move you on to the next step. And just little things like that make the person really feel like you care and like they can actually absorb it and perform after that. It's not just a get through it quick as you can, snap your fingers, move on, and click through the PowerPoint version of whatever the retail or the restaurant version of click through the PowerPoint and get out there on the front line and just get to work. It's a different kind of connotation. And I'm so glad you brought the kind of the human piece of that up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think when learning becomes just this checklist that you're going through, you're not going to meet that end goal that you have as your company, right? Like it's exactly to your point. We're all individuals, and so it's going to resonate differently with me going into a system and going through something than it is going to resonate with you. And you need to ensure that you have something that really meets your full learner pool, and not just the one learner that kind of can go through more of that linear checklist or whatever that is. So you want to make sure you're trying to really engage with your full learner community through different mediums.
Awesome. All right, so we're coming up close to the end of the conversation, and I was trying to figure out why I've enjoyed today so much, and I think it's because in the last year I've taken on the role of trainer in the house with 4 kids going to virtual school. I've suddenly unwillingly pushed into the teacher role, and so I've embraced it. Right, I appreciate it, and my wife carries the bulk of the load, so don't get any misconceptions there. She's done most of the work. I just do 1 day a week, and it's on my shoulders, and that's enough for me. But it gives me a lot of appreciation for the people that are doing the teaching, doing the training, doing the coaching every day, figuring out what style someone has, how to engage that learner, what it's going to take to really bring the best out of this individual. So much fun. So I've enjoyed it, not just for the conversation around the HR tech space, but also I'm like probably picking up some tips here on how to be better next time we've got a virtual learning session for school. But if someone's enjoyed the conversation, Allie, they want to know more about Wisetail and what you and the team are up to, what's the best way for them to connect?
Yes, I would just say through our website. So we're just wisetail.com, and we have there's contact us pages in there, but also you can read a lot about what our clients' experiences, different use cases that they're going through. And so we have a full blog area of our site, and so I think that's a great spot to kind of explore and just understand a little bit more, like, okay, I have a similar use case to Jamba Juice, or I have a similar, use case to another client. You can go in and read a little bit more about what it is that they're doing every day. But both of our platforms are on wisetail.com, so you can read a little bit more about our LMS product and then our LXP product as well. So.
Awesome. Wonderful. I really appreciate you for hanging out with us today, for sharing your expertise. I'm excited about your passion for our space and for really making sure that each learner is heard and cared for and supported in the way that they need to. So I really appreciate you for hanging out with us, Allie.
Yeah, thank you as well, Ben. This is great conversation, and appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. Got some good notes over here. Again, not just for the work context, but for me, for the homeschool context as well. And I kind of stuck a couple mentions in there. You might have caught it to some brand new research we just finished on learning, reskilling, skill development, not just from our perspective as talent leaders, but also from the learner perspective as well. And I can't wait. We'll be sharing some of that new research out very, very soon. Might have to do a special edition of the HR Tech Talks just to dive into it, like we did with our talent acquisition data about a month ago. So excited for that. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate those of you that commented, Rashali and others. Appreciate all of you. And we'll catch you again next week with another HR Tech Talks episode, talking to another vendor that's doing great work in our space, being innovative and serving the community. So excited. Thank you so much. Have a great day.